And I think it's so important, especially for young leaders, that they have a soberness about what you just described.
Yeah.
That when they are challenged to grow, they don't run from that. And I'm around leaders right now where I'm like, oh, you just want to have fun. Like, you just want to be in your sweet spot, never in your weakness. You just want to have fun. And there's this thing that, like, no, if you want to be a leader, it's going to require work and growth.
Hi, and welcome to Cultural Catalyst, where we help you to learn how to live fully alive, co-labor with God, and change the world. And I'm your host, Kris Vallotton, and I want to introduce you to Banning Liebscher. Banning, welcome to the show. And
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you having me jump on and talk.
And Banning's a Kings fan, so we'll just get that out of the way. So we just want you to know that he is a loyalist. He's a loyalist. And Banning and CJ, they planted a church. Well, first of all, you were with us. You were with Bethel Church for how many years?
18 on staff. I was on staff for 18 years, and then I attended there a few years before that in high school. But yeah, I was on staff for 18 years.
And were you like 12 when we put you on staff?
Pretty much. We'll probably have this conversation today. But you promoted me a couple times when I was pretty young.
Yeah, and so Banning's the founder of Jesus Culture, which began in Redding, California, and then later on we sent him out and planted a church there right outside of Sacramento. And so that was that are you on your fourth year, or is this your fifth year?
Is this hard to imagine? We're on 8 years.
Lord have mercy. I was still in.
Well, listen, to be fair, you can't count COVID years, right? So the COVID years, so you were really only a year off because you can get rid of COVID years. But yeah, It's been 8 years.
What's really strange is I was in my 50s when we sent you out. I haven't remembered my 50s for a while. Gosh, I think it's that PTSD, but it's better now that you're gone. Let me just say that.
Absolutely, life is better. Listen, I was convinced when we left that Bethel was going to implode. I'm like, well, we're going to leave, and Bethel's probably going to implode. It's been a good ride. And yet, lo and behold, Bethel hasn't imploded, and they still seem to be growing. So maybe I wasn't as important as I thought I was.
Well, Banning, you were very important to my heart. Banning, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like how, where'd you get saved, and just give us a little history. You have 3 kids.
Yep, totally. Yep. I'm married, 3 kids. Been married for 24 years, 3 kids. I have a 22-year-old, 19-year-old, and a 16-year-old, 2 girls and a boy. I was actually born and raised in Redding. If you've ever been to Redding, if you've ever been to Bethel, you'll find a little bit. It's such a gathering place from around the world that I'm one of just a handful of people that was actually born and raised in Redding. So I was born and raised in Redding, pretty conservative, legalistic Baptist. But I actually started attending Bethel when I was in high school. I was 17 years old, and this was before Pastor Bill was there. Excuse me, before Pastor Bill was there, and I started going to youth group there, and just one night really encountered God on a Sunday night service, and just encountered God, and had grown up in church. But that moment as a teenager where it really becomes yours. You say, God, this is what I want my life to be about. I went home that night and knew I wanted to preach. And I don't even know where that came from, but I remember going home that night and saying, Mom, I want to preach. That's what I want to do with my life. So really dove headfirst into youth group my senior year, and then went away to college for just my freshman year. And my plan was to go to college for 4 years of Bible college, and then to get out. And I just wanted to travel and preach. And that was what I felt called to do. Iverna Tompkins had come through town, Sean Smith. I'd read a Billy Graham book, and Sorry, excuse me. And so I'm there, and the old youth pastor, the start of my sophomore year, called and said, "Hey, I think you should come do an internship." So I came back to do an internship at Bethel, and while I was there, Bill came on staff, and just kind of wrecked all of our lives in the most beautiful way, and just encountered renewal, and got my eyes open to revival, and so I stayed. It's interesting because I was so young in leadership when all this stuff that Bill talks about, everybody leaving the church, the finances. I was so young. I was just having a blast with the Holy, like we're just in meetings every night. We're encountering God. I felt none of that weight. But I was the associate youth pastor. I came on, I was 19 as an intern, 20 associate youth pastor. And then Bill came to me and said, "We'd like you to be the youth pastor." And I turned him down. I said, "No." I said, I kid you not, Chris, I said this. I said, "I don't feel called to the local church, and I don't feel called to young people. I just want to travel and preach." So I turned him down. But a few months later, I thought some doors were going to open that didn't open for me. And I came back to Bill and I said, "Bill, I want to be the youth pastor." Not because I felt called to youth, just it was the door that was open. And so I did that at 21, and just fell in love with the local church, fell in love with young people. And then I was there, for another 16 years, I guess. And so out of that came Jesus Culture, which was just our youth group. We have a similar story, Chris, that you would out of Weaverville.
Yeah.
I mean, we were youth pastoring. Chris Kilala, who's 39, was 12 years old when I started youth ministry.
Wow.
And so we just had all these youth kids, and we were hungry for revival, and Jesus Culture came out of that. And then 8 years ago, we moved down just to Sacramento area and planted a church 7 years ago, and been doing that now for a few years and having a blast.
Banning, do you think, like, you seem to be a natural born leader? I ended up in your life. I think you were 2 years at Bethel when I came and became.
Yep.
I think like year 3. I think I became your leader. That you were kind of assigned. I was assigned to like try to figure out how to lead you. But
I ran into the buzzsaw of Chris. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Mark was leading you before that, right?
I don't. That's a good question, but probably yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't think.
To be honest with you, nobody was leading me before you. It was so chaotic and crazy at that time. Nobody was leading.
That's how it felt, but I didn't know if you had an assigned leader before I got there.
Yeah.
But it feels like you are a natural born leader. First of all, do you think there are people that are naturally born leaders, or do you feel like leadership is something that happens through a process? Do you feel like it takes a gift, a call? Like what is your explanation, first of all, of your own leadership? And then you have a leadership school yourself, and you're speaking at a lot of leadership stuff for us and for other people. So what is your kind of take? Like, is everybody a leader from the way that you view leadership?
Yeah, such a great question, Chris, and something I've really wrestled with. I think I would probably adopt the John Maxwell definition of leadership, and I would put an addition to it. Because Maxwell, he needs my help.
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's fix it. Let's edit his book and send it back to him.
I would like to edit this, but Maxwell would say that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And he would say that everybody has influence. Yeah. And so, but I would say this, it's influence that you've taken responsibility for.
Okay.
So leadership is, I have a measure of influence, and am I taking responsibility for that influence and using it to see the kingdom of God expand? And so I would say absolutely yes. Everybody's called to lead. You're called to lead in your family. You're called to lead in your community. You're called to lead. I don't think everybody has the same measurement of influence, though, and that's okay. That's not like a value statement. There's not, but so, I don't think everybody has a national level of influence. Not everybody has a statewide, but everybody has influence, and everybody is called, I think, to steward that influence and to say, what am I doing with the influence God has given me? And so does the guy who owns the local plumbing business, does he have a national leadership call in his life? No, but he absolutely is called to say, I have influence God has given me, how am I using that to better my city, to better my employees, to better that stuff? So that'd be my definition. For me, my journey of leadership was, so I would say it's both, Kris. I would say, yes, I think everybody is called to be a leader. I think your response to that call matters. And I think how you steward that call matters. So I think what you steward grows. So are people called to be a leader? Yeah. Have they responded to that call? Maybe not. Are people called to be a leader? Yes. Have they actually stewarded that call and grown it? Maybe not. And so a lot of what you're doing is, this would be my take. A lot of what your passion is to help people respond to the call to lead and to help them steward it by growing it. By actually growing their capacity to lead. For me, I guess I was probably, there is some natural people charisma leadership thing. And I there's a couple eye-opening moments for me. One was, I was a junior in high school. I was playing on the basketball team. I wasn't even a starter. I was the sixth man on the basketball team, but the coach made me a captain. Wow. This was a defining moment for me when I look back. The coach made me a captain. And I remember one time I was acting like an idiot or something in life. And he pulled me in his office and he sat, I'll never forget it. This little tiny Christian school, he had a little tiny office that used to be like a closet off the gym. And he sat me down and he said, Banning, you are a leader. I will never, it's the first time that anybody ever told me that. He said, you are a leader and you are not acting like a leader. And he began to challenge me around leadership and actually called me a leader. Wow. And it really did mark me. And I wasn't even like serving God at that time. I was a Christian, but I wasn't like passionate about Jesus. That moment marked me where somebody actually recognized and called it out and challenged me and in there. And then the second one, interestingly enough, when I really surrendered my life to Jesus, that's when the leadership giftings in me, I really began to see, because they were now connected to a purpose. So for me, I didn't, I was just floating along in life. But when I kind of surrendered my life, I said, Jesus, I want all of you, and I want you to use my life to change the world. All of a sudden, like, leadership became something that I'm like, wow, that's in there. And that's part of my journey. So those two things probably. And then honestly, listen, whoever's listening to this right now, Kris, you were such a big part of it for me, because you began to treat me like that early on too. Even in my messes, even in all the things I was doing wrong, you saw something. And then you not only cultivated in me, you gave me promotions that were beyond my capacity because you saw something in me. Yeah. And so I think that I'm not just saying that because we're on the podcast together, but
you're saying that because of the money I sent you earlier this week.
Yeah, Telly.
Yeah.
Those things, I think they didn't necessarily. Listen, I may have more influence than others. I'm not saying that good or bad. But there were a few people in my life who actually recognized it, called it out, and challenged it. Yeah. Which made me begin to lean into it a lot more. Yeah. And so I think that that's probably a lot of my journey of why I was embracing that. And honestly, I'm so passionate about it. I want to come alongside people and go, you're a leader. Take responsibility and grow. I was just with pastors right now at a conference we just did. And I want to say, listen, guys, I was telling them it's not about numbers. It's about faithfulness and faithfulness. But anyways, I said this, but you also need to grow in your leadership gifts. I said, some of you guys are using Gideon's army as your excuse. I'm like, you don't have Gideon's army. You have a low leadership lid. Yeah, exactly. Grow your leadership lid. You know what I mean? So that's my passion, probably.
I was going to say, I agree with all your definitions and what you were just sharing. Moses was instructed by Jethro, his father-in-law. He said, put men over tens, 50s, hundreds, and thousands.
Yeah.
And, I think there are people that can do a fantastic job with 10 people. it might be a little metaphoric, but where
I get it.
That's their level of skill and anointing and call, and their life's goal is to pastor 10. I say pastor, mentor 10 people, disciple 10 people.
I get it. Yeah.
And then there's others that can do the job that someone does with 10, they can do with 1,000, and the impact they're having. And the other thing that you said that what I think is really powerful, and I'd like to just repeat it, is there was a rite of passage in your life that I think is super important for leaders, women and men, where someone else acknowledges you as a leader and invites you to the leadership table, so to speak.
Yes.
And basically you get to eat with the big boys. You get invited, from the children's table, in my metaphor, up to the adult table. And then you get called out when you're still acting like you're at the other table. And I think that so many people, it's kind of what I think happened with Barnabas and Paul, where Barnabas takes a hold of Saul and he becomes the great apostle Paul. Banning, what is I have a question here. Let me just find it again here.
As you're looking for that, Kris,
yeah.
for that, let me just say this. And I think it's so important, especially for young leaders, that they have a soberness about what you just described. Yeah. That when they are challenged to grow, they don't run from that. And I'm around leaders right now where I'm like, oh, you just want to have fun. Like, you just want to be in your sweet spot, never in your weakness. You just want to have fun. And there's this thing that, like, no, if you want to be a leader, it's going to require work and growth. Yeah. And growth is not always fun. So I think that when you, like, there's that twofold thing. You as a father in my life saw something and invited me to the table. And then me as a son and a younger leader had to respond to the challenge and the input and the correction and actually be okay. I see a lot of people that don't go somewhere because they just don't want to do the hard work of growth. Yeah. And so I think there's a twofold thing with that.
I think, what you're saying. No, I mean, I heard a quote the other day and I posted it. I reposted it on my social page because it had a huge impact. And he said, the quote was something like this: some people were born to have fun. Others were born to change the world. Others were born to change the world. And I'm like, yeah. And then, your words, Paul said to Timothy, suffer hardship with me as a soldier, and not as, now I'm, from here on, I'm kind of ad-libbing, as a soldier, not as a civilian, not as a, not taking your liberties as a civilian. And so there's this whole thing with Paul to Timothy, like, I'm suffering, you're suffering with me, bro. You're in the fight with me. And I think that he wasn't just called to the leadership table, he was called to the fray. Timothy was called to the fray with Paul, and he was forged in the fire.
Yeah, Kris, you could address this as well. I remember the Lord talking to me early on, because when you say yes to the call to lead, there is a real cost involved in that. Now, we don't talk about the cost much because, I mean, what you get in return is so beautiful, but there's a real cost involved. And I remember the Lord challenging me in my mid-20s, because all my friends were kind of having fun. Yeah. Like, literally they're down at the India casino playing nickel slots. Were they in deep sin? Were they morally falling? No, right? But they're down there playing nickel slots and they're just having fun. And we just wouldn't go. And I remember the Lord saying this: Banning, I am going to require things from you that I do not require of others. Yeah. Because I'm going to require things of you that I don't require of others. And I could complain and be like, well, that's unfair, whatever else. Or I could just recognize I've got a call on my life. And that call means that there are certain things that the Lord's going to require of me. And you would have the same story. There's the Lord just saying, hey,
I do have the same story.
I have some requirements for you, Kris. Like, if you want to actually change the world, there's some requirements. And guess what? I'm not requiring that from the guy next to you.
Yeah.
And that's part of the cost.
Yeah. To whom much is given, much is required.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Banning, looking back, in your early days of, leading, pastoring, what was the biggest, or maybe what was the biggest change that you had to make greatest challenge, biggest change,
Yeah.
hardest problem, as you came into leadership? Like, what was the giant in your land that you consistently had to defeat to actually continue to have favor and have people follow you and influence them in a way that was healthy and whole?
Yeah. I'll probably just things that would come to mind for me. I mean, I would probably give you 10, but there would probably be two. For me as a young leader, and I started so young, that I find when people ask, like, what's the difference now at 45 compared to when I was 25? When I was 25, I'm a visionary guy. So I see down the road, I'm passionate, I'm type A, I'm driven, I want to get somewhere. And then I'm also critical. So I'm a critical thought process guy. I walk into a room, there's 100 things, 98 are good and 2 are wrong. And I see the 2 that are wrong, and want to go address those things. The problem was when I was younger, I couldn't stop and actually enjoy the moment. So I look back at my younger years and just realized I missed a lot of kind of moments because I'm just down the road and nothing's good enough. Yeah. So we're never where we should be.
Yeah.
And nothing's ever good enough.
Yeah.
And so whether it was leading youth group or whatever else, we should be further and it should be better. And I think as I get older now, I think I probably have gotten slower in a good way, where I'm able to stop and enjoy the moment a little bit. I can enjoy what God's doing in the moment. There's things that need to be worked on. Great. We need to be further down the road. And honestly, as small as that sounds, it's been huge for me, because it was such a massive struggle where I was not really enjoying anything. Like it just was never enjoying anything because we were never far enough and never good enough. So I think that's one, but here's probably the biggest. Well, I can't say this is the biggest, but here's one of the biggest. And people ask me this question about my time at Bethel. They want to know, like, what'd you learn? And you're like, well, I learned the kingdom, and and I learned the supernatural, and I learned faith, and I learned signs and wonders, and I learned the prophetic. I learned all that. But you know what the big one was community and people.
Yeah.
Like the biggest challenge was, am I going to stick out community? And am I going to learn people? And so I think for me, the issue of community, I mean, we really walked through some real stuff, and we had to make real deliberate decisions around, am I going to continue to move towards community? Am I going to allow God to use community to shape my life? And then in the process of some of that, as a young leader, what happened to me all the time was I couldn't keep a team. So if anybody knows the DISC, D-I-S-C, I'm like a high I. So if you were a high I, you could survive on my team. The problem that I ran into was that, and this is the truth, I really believed that we had the best youth group in the nation on paper. That on paper, the strategy, the ideas, what I saw from the Lord, I'm like, this is revolutionary. I just couldn't get it from paper to reality. and I couldn't get it from paper to reality because I didn't know how to lead a team. If you were a high I, it was great, but S's died around me, C's died around me. They never stuck with me. They all left. There was internal drama. There was tension all the time. And so I just like the ability to actually lead a team that's healthy and thriving and working together to accomplish that vision. That was one of the biggest things that I had to learn as well. So community, and then that team thing. So now as I'm older, I don't have it all perfect, but now as I'm older, there are D's and I's and S's and C's who are thriving and connected under my leadership, moving forward. And now it's not just the best youth group in the nation on paper. We're actually able to kind of move things forward into reality in a way that I couldn't before, because I just didn't know how to lead teams. I didn't understand people as well. I didn't understand me as well. Community was hard. It was all those dynamics. So that's maybe a vague answer, but those would be something.
Banning, what's the greatest victory that you've had in your life when in reference to ministry and leading? Because you've shared a whole bunch of your failures. Like here's some of my great failures. But what's I mean, there's things in my mind that that I know you really well. So I'm like, oh, that was amazing. You pulled that off. And
here's a couple things I think we've done well. One is I think people have stayed with us for a long time, and I actually find great joy and pride in that I can look around and say these guys have been with us for 20 years. But I would say this: there's a few areas that, and I'll reference a story with you. There's a few areas where I feel like I believed the Lord on that.
Yeah.
And I remember the Lord talking to us about stadiums or gatherings or all this type of stuff.
I was hoping you're going to share that story.
Yeah. And I'll never forget standing in the doorway of your office one day and you looking at me and saying, Banning, I think you can do what's on your heart here. I remember you telling me this. I don't know if you remember this story. I was standing in the doorway of your office. You were sitting at your desk and you were looking at me. You said, Banning, I've been thinking about you. I think you can do what's on your heart here. And so there was a few things that I felt the Lord show me. And I felt like there was a few things he asked in obedience that we stepped out in, and was even for us when we went to, which is crazy, Kris, it was 10 years ago. When we went to Chicago at Allstate Arena, we had like 14,000 come for this gathering. And in our world, in Bethel's world as well, like we hadn't really seen anything like that yet. And yeah. And so, but I felt like the Lord really spoke to me about it. And we leaned into it. And for me, the success wasn't just the amount of people, because I remember walking around Chicago 2 days before that event, like literally praying and crying. I was so overwhelmed by just the pressure of it all.
Yeah.
But I remember going, God, no matter what happens, I said yes. And I think there's a few things for me where I've said yes a few times. Hopefully my life is a yes, but I've said yes a few times to some things that were risky and scary. And there's something in me that says, I said yes, and that's it. So there's a few things I think we've done where I actually said, I believed God. Like I believed God there. Like I truly believed what he said, and we acted on it. And so, Chicago obviously is maybe the best example or poster child. Even the church, man, even planting this church down here. You were with me for a while. I was very sober about planting a church because I have never felt like I'm a great pastor. I've never felt like I'm a great consistent leader. So conferences are easy. You do them, you pop in, you pop out. If it didn't work out in Dallas, you don't go back the next year. But pastoring is such a different rhythm, or local church is such a different rhythm. And so when we came down here, everybody's like, it's going to blow up. You're going to be great. It's going to be all this. And I was like, I don't think it's just that easy. And I think the church part too was just so much obedience that was required of it. Mm-hmm. And to see it really flourish and thrive, and know that it wasn't necessarily my strong suit, but I said yes to God to do it. So those things maybe.
Ben, we got about 4 or 5 minutes. COVID has been tough for everybody. Everybody who's listening on the globe, will say a big amen to COVID was tough. And even if you financially figured out some way to thrive in it, you still, the lockdowns, the uncertainty, the craziness, not just for churches, but for just about every realm of life. How did you? I know private conversations we've had. How did you?
Private conversations on your podcast.
Yeah, no, we're not talking about those. But like everybody, your ministry shrank, and now it's coming back. But in the midst of that, every leader goes through. You do it in business. Like you have a bad. I remember being in Weaverville and having sales that were half of our sales the year before and wondering if we were going to survive, and asking myself the question, like, is there a bad rumor going around? Did we do something wrong? Did we lose our best customer? And so, and it's the same in ministry. I remember I had a home group at my house for 17 years. And I remember 4 or 5 times Wednesday nights when nobody came, like not a soul came.
Yeah.
And our home group was an average probably 30 people. And I'm like, it's over. My ministry's over. How did you weather, and how are you weathering this COVID storm? What did you learn out of your, this last challenge that we've all faced?
Yeah. Well, I love it. Such a great question, Kris. I for me, there's a couple of things. One is this. I think that I just held on to the voice of the Lord in so many ways. Like I realized for me, as long as God's speaking, which obviously we know he's always speaking through his word. Yeah. So hear me on this, but as long as God's speaking to me, I'll be okay. And so as I was navigating it, I'm like, Lord, I just need clarity on what you're doing. And if I can have clarity on what you're doing, then I find so many people struggle through seasons of fire or uncertainty or confusion because they have no clarity on what God's doing. Yeah. So for us early on, it was still difficult, but the Lord was being very clear to us in what he's doing. And much of it was, listen, we find out what we're made of. We find out where the cracks are in our foundation, so that they can get fixed. Yeah. I think fire both burns away wood, hay, and stubble, but it also reveals what's should stay. Yeah. Fire reveals the good and it burns away the bad. So in this moment, we just leaned into that thing and said, God, you are revealing to us the things that need to be done away with, and you're revealing to us the things that we need to build on because of what you want to do the next 20 years in our lives. So as painful as it was, there was so much, and I really, we say this a lot, it was like a season of revealing and invitation. So it's like the Lord coming and going, hey, there's some real immaturity in your life in that area. He revealed it, and then he invited us, I want to take you deeper in maturity. It's being revealed that you're not actually leaning on a kingdom that's unshakable. You're leaning on an economy of the world. You're leaning on a political party. You're leaning on things that are shaking. And that's revealing to you that maybe you're not leaning on the kingdom at the level you think you are. So my point is, as we were going through this, really trying to just take it and say, God, I want you to refine me. I want you to grow me. Yeah. So I want you to reveal things to me because I believe it's unto something. That everything we're walking through wasn't just like, well, what a waste of a season. That was a waste of a season. It's like, no, this season did something because of what God wants to do in the earth. And so I think for me, really trying to continually just get clarity from the Lord. What is it that you're doing right now? And I'll embrace that. I'll embrace what you're doing, but I need to know what you're doing. And he might say, I am trying to strengthen your foundation. There are some cracks in your foundation that the only way they get revealed is in the midst of shaking. They do not get revealed another way but shaking. So I don't know if that even makes sense.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that I felt like I was in the spin cycle of the washing machine. And just about the time, the washing machine stopped, I'm like, oh, wow, over. Then the Lord threw us in the dryer, and he's like, okay, now let's dry you off now, No, oh, my goodness. Banning, thank you so much for being on. Could you just pray for the people who are watching now and will be watching this later? Yes. For, it's been a tough season for lots of people.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray this. I'm going to pray over you real quick. Those of you that are watching, listening, refreshing, but also that thing we're talking about where the word of the Lord would come and you would have real clarity. So Father, I just pray right now, we've all been in the same boat in different avenues, in different areas, whether people are in ministry, in the church, or they're leading out in the world. But God, I pray that you would come, one, and bring great refreshing. I just see such a season of refreshing for people. Lord. I just see a season where you're just washing people. of all of the mud and the dirt, all the dust that's come on them. You're washing them, and just a real season of even that feeling that's going to, as you know, when you get out of the shower and there's just that refreshing feeling, Lord, that you're going to bring that into people's lives. But I also pray this. I just pray that you would speak great clarity to them about the season they're in and what you are doing in that season. So that they would understand what you're doing right now, how you're shaping them, how you're molding them, that they would understand that you're calling them to a deeper realm of trust, because where you're taking them will require greater trust. That you are trying to deepen in the lives of people trust, because you're trying to take them into a realm that will require greater levels of trust. And so we just bless people in the name of Jesus.
Ben, thank you so much. I'm so proud of you. I love you.
Yeah, thank you, Kris.
Sending love to CJ and your team. And
absolutely.
We'll talk again later. Thank you, Banning.